I found an Apache girl left for dead, and I couldn't walk away. It was a quiet morning when he set out on his journey, the kind of morning where the sun stretched slowly across the sky, spilling warm light over the hills and valleys. The air smelled fresh, a mix of pine and earth, and the only sounds were the distant cries of birds and the whisper of the wind through the trees. He had been walking for hours along a rough trail that led toward the outskirts of a reservation. He wasn't looking for trouble. He wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. He just enjoyed being outdoors, feeling the land under his feet, and letting the silence fill his mind.
As he moved deeper into the woods, he noticed that the path became less traveled.
The footprints of humans were rare, and the signs of wildlife became more obvious. A broken branch here, a set of deer tracks there. He slowed his pace, careful not to disturb the natural rhythm around him. That's when he first sensed something was wrong. At first it was subtle, a small flicker of movement between the trees, too small to be an animal but too deliberate to be ignored. Then came the faintest sound, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. It was difficult to pinpoint, but it tugged at him. He stopped, squinting into the shadows, trying to make sense of what he saw. At first he thought it might be a lost animal, perhaps a young deer or a coyote, but as he stepped closer the shape became clearer. It wasn't an animal. It was a child. A girl. She lay on the ground, barely moving, her clothes torn and dirty. She was so small and fragile, and yet the sight of her stirred something deep inside him. He froze, his heart pounding, unsure of what to do next. The moment felt surreal, almost like stepping into a nightmare. The wind seemed to stop, and the birds fell silent, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. He dropped his backpack and moved cautiously toward her. Each step felt heavy with uncertainty. She looked pale, and her body seemed limp, as if the life inside her was fading. There were marks on her arms and legs, scratches, bruises, dirt, but he could not yet tell how serious they were. Her eyes fluttered open slightly, revealing fear and confusion, but also a quiet strength that surprised him. Even in such a vulnerable state, there was a spark of life that refused to disappear. He knelt beside her, his mind racing. "Are you okay?" "Can you hear me?" he asked softly, though he knew she might not respond. Her lips parted slightly and a faint sound escaped, more like a sigh than a word. He reached out gently, making sure not to startle her, and touched her shoulder. She flinched, but did not pull away completely. That small reaction told him that she was still conscious, still fighting, and that he had a chance to help her. Looking around, he realized just how isolated the place was. The trail behind him was narrow and overgrown. No other people were in sight. No houses, no cars, no signs of immediate help. The realization was frightening. If he didn't act quickly, no one else would find her. The thought of leaving her there, even for a moment, felt impossible. He had to make a choice, turn back to safety or risk everything to help a child in desperate need. He knew, without hesitation, that he couldn't walk away. He checked her injuries as best as he could with his limited knowledge. Her arm was bent at an odd angle, and there were cuts on her legs and arms. Her clothes were torn in several places, and dirt clung to her skin. She was shivering, not just from the cold, but from shock. He tore a piece of cloth from his shirt and wrapped it gently around her arm to stabilize it. Then he knelt beside her, trying to provide comfort, speaking to her in calm, reassuring words. Breaths. "You're going to be okay. I'm here. I won't leave you." It took a while, but eventually she managed a weak nod. He could see the fear in her eyes, but there was also a glimmer of trust forming. That trust gave him courage. He realized that he was not just helping her physically, he was also giving her hope. showing her that someone cared. And that made all the difference. The next challenge was moving her. She couldn't walk, and the terrain was rough and unforgiving. Every step he took had to be measured and careful. Rocks, roots, and uneven ground made it easy to trip or lose balance. Yet he pressed on, determined to find a safer place or, if possible, some kind of help. With her in his arms, he felt a mix of fear and determination. Fear for her, fear for what might happen, but determination that he would not let this be the end for her. As they moved, flashes of questions filled his mind. Bet, who was she? How did she end up here? Alone. How long had she been left like this? The story behind her situation was unknown, but that uncertainty didn't matter as much as what needed to be done now. Action mattered more than answers. Each step forward was an act of survival, not just for her, but for both of them. Breaths. Hours seemed to pass as he carefully carried her through the dense woods. The sun rose higher in the sky, casting long shadows and highlighting the rugged beauty of the land, but beauty felt distant compared to the urgency of their situation. Every sound, every movement in the forest made him tense, ready to react to any danger. And yet, there was also a strange sense of connection between him, the girl, and the wild, untamed world around them. It was a reminder of how fragile life can be, and how quickly things can change. Finally, he spotted a small clearing ahead. It wasn't much, but it was open and safer than the dense forest. He laid her down gently, careful not to cause more pain. She closed her eyes, exhausted but alive. He gave her water from his bottle and continued speaking softly, telling her stories, anything to keep her awake and focused. His voice, steady and calm, became a lifeline in the midst of chaos. In that quiet clearing, he realized the depth of what had just happened. He had stumbled upon a moment of pure human vulnerability, a life hanging by a thread, and he had chosen to intervene. The weight of that choice pressed on him, but it also filled him with a sense of purpose. For the first time that day, he allowed himself to breathe, to acknowledge the bond forming between them. It was a bond built on trust, courage, and the raw instinct to help another human being in need. As the day wore on, he knew they couldn't stay in the clearing forever. Help was needed, medical attention, someone who could ensure her safety, someone who could understand the situation better than he could alone. But for now, he had done what mattered most. He had not walked away. And in that moment, the girl's faint but steady breathing told him that life had not yet abandoned her. The forest around them continued its quiet rhythm, but inside the clearing something profound had shifted. A connection had been made, a choice had been honored, and the fragile thread of life had been protected. He didn't know what would happen next, or how challenging the path ahead would be, but he did know one thing. He could never regret stepping forward, never regret deciding to stay when so many might have turned away. And so, with the girl still in his care, he prepared for the next steps, ready to face whatever challenges came their way. Every step, every decision, carried the weight of responsibility, but also the promise of hope. In that quiet forest, on that seemingly ordinary morning, something extraordinary had begun. The story of survival, courage, and the unbreakable bond between two strangers brought together by fate. Inspiration. He knew they couldn't stay in the clearing forever. The girl needed more than just temporary safety. She needed help, real help, from people who could care for her injuries and keep her safe. But the thought of moving through the woods with her in such a fragile state filled him with worry. Every step could make her pain worse, every uneven root or hidden rock a danger. He looked down at her small face, still pale but slightly calmer now, and promised himself silently that he would do whatever it took to get her out of the woods alive. First, he tried to make her as comfortable as possible. He used his jacket to cushion her back, adjusting her arm gently so that the broken limb was better supported. He tore a second strip of cloth from his shirt to make a temporary sling. Each movement had to be slow and deliberate. He spoke softly to her the entire time, even when she barely responded. His voice became a steady rhythm, a reminder that someone was there, that she wasn't alone anymore. After a few minutes, she stirred. Her eyelids opened slowly, and her small, tired eyes looked around, taking in the trees, the sun, and him. She didn't speak, but she nodded weakly when he asked if she could move a little. That small gesture, almost imperceptible, filled him with determination. She was trying. Even in her exhausted state, she was fighting. Bay. And that fight deserved to be met with every ounce of care he could offer. The journey back to safety was going to be long. There was no road nearby, no passing vehicle, and the nearest town was miles away. He knew the only option was to carry her carefully through the rough forest trails until he could find a way to reach someone who could help. He lifted her gently, feeling the weight of her small body, and began walking. Every step required extreme caution. The uneven ground threatened to trip him more than once. He had to stop occasionally to rest, setting her down carefully and making sure she stayed comfortable. As they moved, he tried to keep her engaged, to distract her from the pain. He told her stories about the forest, about the birds singing above, and about the strange but beautiful shapes the clouds made in the sky. His voice was calm, steady, and warm, trying to fill the silence that could have otherwise been filled with fear. Slowly, she began to respond. A faint smile here, a small laugh there. It was the first sign that she was beginning to trust him, that she was beginning to feel that maybe, just maybe, she was safe. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher. Sweat dripped down his back, and his arms ached from holding her. But he never stopped. He knew that if he faltered, even for a moment, the consequences could be severe. His focus was unwavering. Every tree he passed, every shadow on the ground, every rustle in the brush, he was aware of it all, always vigilant. And yet, despite the fatigue, there was a sense of purpose driving him forward. This was bigger than him. It was about life, about doing the right thing, about not abandoning someone when they needed him most. He noticed that the girl's breathing was uneven at times, and her small hands clutched at his shirt. Bashan. She seemed frightened of the forest, frightened of being alone. He kept talking to her, reminding her that he was there, that she was safe, that he wouldn't let anything happen to her. He spoke about simple things, the way the sun warmed the earth, the sound of birds in the trees, the way the wind whispered through the leaves. Slowly, he saw a change in her demeanor. Her eyes stopped darting nervously, and her body relaxed slightly against his chest. That small sign of trust strengthened his resolve. But eventually he spotted a faint trail in the distance. It wasn't a proper road, but it looked like a path that someone might have used before. He decided to follow it, hoping it would lead them closer to civilization, or at least a place where someone could help. The path was narrow and filled with obstacles, fallen branches, loose rocks, and thick patches of grass. Each step was careful, deliberate. He had to plan each movement so that he didn't trip or cause her any more pain. The physical strain was intense, but he barely noticed it. His attention was entirely on her, on keeping her safe, on getting them both to help. As they moved along the trail, he began to notice signs of life. Distant sounds of a running stream, birds singing in a more lively way, and even faint smells of nearby vegetation. I reminded him that the world was still alive and beautiful even in the midst of such a desperate situation. He shared these observations with her, trying to bring small moments of comfort and wonder to a frightening and painful experience. She responded in little ways: a soft nod, a small squeeze of his hand, a faint smile. Those tiny gestures reminded him why he couldn't give up. After some time, he finally saw what looked like smoke in the distance, rising slowly into the sky. It wasn't much, but it suggested that someone might be nearby. He quickened his pace slightly, careful not to jostle her, and headed toward it. As they approached, he could make out the shape of a small cabin and hear the faint sound of voices. Relief surged through him. But he didn't let himself relax completely. He still had to get her safely to the people who could care for her. When they reached the cabin, he knocked softly on the door. A woman appeared, her expression shifting quickly from surprise to concern as she saw the girl in his arms. He explained the situation briefly, trying to keep his voice calm but urgent. The woman immediately took action, bringing blankets, water, and offering to call for medical assistance. The protagonist gently handed the girl over, feeling a mix of relief and lingering worry. He watched as the woman examined her, checking her injuries and making sure she was comfortable. Even as professionals or capable adults began to take over, he stayed nearby, refusing to leave her side. He felt a connection to her now, a bond formed through hours of struggle, care, and shared endurance. She had relied on him when no one else was around, and he could not simply step away now. Watching her receive proper attention filled him with a quiet satisfaction, but he also knew that the road to recovery would be long and challenging. During this time, he learned more about the girl. Her name, her age, bits of her background, and the circumstances that might have led to her being alone in the forest. Each detail filled him with sadness and empathy, but also with a deeper sense of responsibility. He had saved her from immediate danger, but she still needed emotional support, care, and protection. The enormity of that realization weighed on him, but it also strengthened his determination. As the day turned to evening, he stayed close, talking gently to her, offering reassurance, and simply being present. He realized that sometimes presence itself is a powerful form of help. She needed to know that someone cared, that someone would not leave, and that someone believed in her resilience. He watched as she slowly began to relax, her breathing steadier, her eyes more focused. In that moment, he understood that the act of helping someone goes beyond first aid. It is about creating trust, hope, and a sense of safety in a world that can be cruel and indifferent. He spent hours there, waiting for further assistance to arrive, but also reflecting on the experience, the fear he had felt earlier, the physical strain, the uncertainty. It all seemed part of a larger lesson. Sometimes life presents moments that demand courage, compassion, and action, and it is in those moments that true character is revealed. By choosing not to walk away, he had made a difference. And though the day had been long and exhausting, he felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that the girl's life had been changed forever. As night approached, the forest around them grew quiet once more, but inside the small cabin, warmth and safety had begun to take hold. The girl, though still fragile, was breathing steadily and beginning to trust that she was no longer alone. The protagonist knew that their journey was far from over, but he had crossed the most dangerous part, getting her out of immediate harm and into a place where help could reach her. And in that moment he understood that true courage is not measured by the absence of fear, but by the willingness to act in spite of it. He stayed through the night, watching over her, speaking softly, and making sure she was comfortable. Every small movement, every gentle word, every quiet gesture of care was part of building the trust that would be essential for her continued recovery. Then as he sat there, exhausted but alert, he realized that sometimes the most important journey is not through the wilderness outside, but through the wilderness of human struggle, vulnerability, and resilience. The next morning, the forest was bathed in soft light, the kind that made everything feel calm and quiet. He woke early, still near the girl who had slept more peacefully than she had in days. Her small chest rose and fell steadily, and for the first time, there was no sign of fear in her eyes. She looked at him with a faint smile, and he felt a warmth in his chest he couldn't explain. It was a mixture of relief and responsibility. Relief that she had survived the night, and responsibility because he knew this was only the beginning.
The real challenge, getting her the professional help she needed, was still ahead.
He spoke softly to her, encouraging her to eat and drink a little, offering bits of bread and water from the supplies he had brought.
She accepted, slowly and carefully, her small hands trembling as she took each bite. Her eyes flickered up to him, and he smiled, offering reassurance.
It was a small victory, but in moments like these, every small victory mattered. She was alive, and she was slowly regaining strength. But he knew that this temporary comfort was not enough. She needed proper medical attention to heal her injuries fully, and that meant finding the right people who could care for her. After a brief discussion with the woman who had welcomed them to the cabin, he learned about a nearby clinic that could help. It was a small building not far by car, but still difficult to reach through the forest trails. They needed transportation, and quickly. He stayed calm, knowing that panic would not help, and made a plan. A neighbor who had noticed the smoke and had helped earlier offered to drive them. The girl was hesitant at first, uncertain of strangers and the unknown, but he stayed close, speaking softly and holding her hand until she agreed to go. The drive to the clinic was quiet. The girl leaned against him, exhausted but alert enough to take in her surroundings. Every bump in the road made him wince, worrying that it might hurt her, but she remained still, trusting him. He realized then that trust was not something given lightly. It had to be earned through patience, care, and consistency. And she had already begun to trust him, a trust that he would honor, no matter what.
At the clinic, the staff immediately noticed her condition.
They ushered her into a room for examination, and he stayed close, holding her hand while the doctors and nurses worked. They asked questions about her injuries, her background, and how she had ended up in the forest. He answered as best as he could, giving them the information that mattered most. Watching the professionals assess her, treat wounds, and clean bruises filled him with relief. For the first time, he felt that she was truly in safe hands, though his protective instincts didn't let him leave her side. As the day wore on, he learned more about her. Her name, her age, and small details about her life began to emerge. But she was only 10 years old, living in a small community nearby. Her parents had struggled to care for her, and circumstances had left her alone in dangerous situations before. The more he heard, the heavier his heart felt. It was difficult to imagine a child so small facing so many challenges alone. Yet there was resilience in her, a quiet determination to survive that amazed him. Every story she shared, every small smile revealed a spirit that refused to break, even in the face of hardship. He also realized that the girl needed more than just physical care. She had been abandoned, left to fend for herself, and that experience had left emotional scars. She flinched at sudden movements, hesitated to speak at first, and sometimes stared off into space, lost in memories he could not fully understand. He stayed close, offering comfort without forcing words. He knew that healing was a delicate process, especially for a child who had been through trauma. Patience, kindness, and quiet reassurance were as important as medicine. Throughout the day, he watched her interact with the staff. At first, she was timid, unsure whether to trust them. But he encouraged her, gently reminding her that these people were there to help. Slowly, she began to respond, answering questions softly and allowing them to touch her arm and check her injuries. Each small step felt monumental. It was not just about her recovery. It was about restoring her sense of safety, her belief that the world could be kind even when it had been cruel. He also spent time speaking to the staff about ways to support her long-term. He asked questions about therapy, about emotional care, and about how to ensure she wouldn't face similar danger again. His mind was full of concern for her future. The medical care could treat the immediate injuries, but her well-being required more than bandages and medicine. It required understanding, patience, and a safe environment where she could regain her confidence and sense of belonging. Bay. As hours passed, he noticed small changes in her demeanor. She began to smile more often. Her laughter came in soft, shy bursts, and she even made small jokes with the nurses. These moments, though fleeting, filled him with hope. He realized that healing was not just about tending to wounds. It was about nurturing trust, giving her space to feel safe, and showing her that people could care deeply without expecting anything in return. Every laugh, every small gesture, was a step toward reclaiming the childhood she had almost lost. During breaks, he spoke with her privately, telling stories about the forest, about animals, about adventures they might have together someday. He reminded her of her strength, of how brave she had been when left alone in the woods. She listened quietly, absorbing his words, and occasionally offered her own thoughts. These conversations created a bond between them, one built on shared experiences, trust, and care. He realized that his presence was now as crucial to her recovery as any medicine or treatment. As evening approached, he reflected on the day's events. From the moment he discovered her in the forest to the time they spent at the clinic, every choice, every action had mattered. His decision not to walk away had set in motion a chain of events that would change her life forever. He felt a deep sense of responsibility, but also a quiet pride. He had witnessed courage, resilience, and hope firsthand, and he knew that his role, while challenging, was vital in helping her reclaim a sense of safety and trust in the world. Bound. Later, when the clinic was quiet and the staff took a moment to rest, he sat beside her and held her hand. She leaned against him, tired but secure. He told her that she was safe now, that she had survived something terrifying, and that she had the strength to overcome it. She nodded slowly, her small hand squeezing his in acknowledgement. It was a silent promise between them. He would continue to be there, supporting her, helping her navigate the next steps of her recovery.
He also reflected on the broader reality of her situation.
Many children in remote areas faced danger, neglect, or isolation. He realized that his decision to intervene was not just about saving one life, it was about recognizing the importance of human connection, empathy, and action. By choosing to act, he had not only helped her survive, but also reminded himself and others of the power of compassion and courage. The night settled in, calm and quiet, but his mind remained alert. He knew that while her immediate physical needs had been addressed, the journey ahead would require ongoing support, emotional care, and protection. And he was ready to be part of that journey. As he watched her drift into sleep, he felt a deep sense of purpose. This was no longer just about a chance encounter in the woods. It was about commitment, about standing by someone when they needed him most, and about giving her the opportunity to reclaim her life. In those moments, he understood something profound.
Sometimes, helping someone means more than performing a single act of bravery.
It means staying, listening, supporting, and being present through the long, slow process of healing. And he knew that he would remain by her side every step of the way as she began the difficult but necessary journey of recovery. The days that followed at the clinic were slow, quiet, and filled with both challenges and small victories. The girl, though no longer in immediate danger, was far from fully healed. Her body was recovering, but her spirit remained fragile. She flinched at sudden movements, hesitated when speaking, and sometimes retreated into herself for long stretches of time. The staff provided excellent medical care, tending to her bruises, scratches, and fatigue, but the real work, he realized, would be helping her rebuild trust in people and in the world. He spent most of his time at the clinic with her. During the mornings, he helped her with small tasks, feeding herself, drinking water, and even gently stretching her stiff limbs under the guidance of the medical staff.
Each movement, each small act was an exercise in patience and encouragement.
When she struggled, he offered words of reassurance. "It's okay. Take your time. You're safe now." His calm presence became a lifeline for her, a reminder that she didn't need to face the world alone. At first, she barely spoke. Her eyes told the story more than words ever could: fear, confusion, sadness, and exhaustion. But slowly, with his gentle encouragement, she began to open up. She shared small details about her life, things that seemed ordinary but spoke volumes about the hardship she had endured. She talked about her village, about friends she had once played with, and about moments of fear when she had been left alone. Each story was accompanied by long pauses and hesitant glances, as if testing whether he would respond with understanding or judgment. He always responded with kindness, nodding, listening, and validating her feelings. One day, after a long morning of treatment, they sat together in the small garden outside the clinic. The sun shone warmly, and birds chirped softly in the trees. Psst. She watched them carefully, as if noticing every detail for the first time. He pointed out the flowers, the leaves, and the shadows dancing on the ground. He told her stories about the forest where he had found her, about the animals, the wind, and the sunlight. Slowly, she began to smile. Small at first, and then more genuine. It was the first real sign of joy he had seen in her since discovering her in the woods. As the days passed, the staff and he worked together to create a routine for her. Routine they all knew was essential for building trust and stability. She would wake up, eat breakfast, undergo treatment, and then spend time in the garden or in quiet activities that encouraged expression. Drawing, storytelling, and even gentle games. Each day he remained by her side, quietly observing her progress, offering encouragement, and celebrating small achievements. A simple act, like standing up without assistance or laughing at a joke, became a moment of triumph. But there were setbacks, of course. Some days she refused to eat or participate in activities. Other days she would flinch at the touch of a nurse or cry quietly when reminded of her past experiences. These moments were painful to witness. But he never gave up. He held her hand, spoke softly, and reminded her that it was okay to feel scared or sad. He knew that recovery was not a straight path. It was full of ups and downs, and patience was essential. Slowly, the girl began to trust him more. She would look at him for reassurance, seek his opinion, and even share small details about her feelings. They developed a silent understanding, a bond built on shared experiences, empathy, and patience. She was learning to trust again, not just him, but the idea that there were people in the world who genuinely cared for her well-being.
Each day brought a new layer of confidence, a new step toward emotional healing.
He also spent time speaking to the medical staff about long-term care. They discussed therapy options, educational support, and ways to integrate her back into a safe community environment. He wanted to ensure that she would have more than temporary safety. He wanted her to have a future filled with hope, stability, and opportunities to thrive.
Every conversation, every decision reflected his deep commitment to her well-being.
Outside the clinic, the community began to notice their story. Some were surprised that a stranger had intervened, while others admired his courage and dedication. The story of the girl who had been left alone in the forest slowly spread, bringing attention to the challenges faced by children in remote areas. He realized that his actions could inspire others to act with compassion, to intervene when someone was in danger, and to never underestimate the impact of a single act of kindness. As the girl's strength returned, they began to spend more time together outside the structured routines of treatment. They walked in nearby gardens, watched birds, and explored safe areas where she could enjoy the world without fear. She began to laugh more freely, ask questions, and even share small stories about her hopes and dreams. These moments were precious. They were proof that resilience existed even in the most vulnerable, that trust could be rebuilt, and that hope could grow even after immense hardship. Despite the progress, he remained vigilant. He knew that her past experiences could resurface at any moment, and he was prepared to provide support whenever needed. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, she suddenly became quiet and withdrawn. He noticed the tension in her small body and asked gently if she wanted to talk. After a pause, she spoke about the fear she had felt when left alone in the forest. He listened patiently, holding her hand, validating her feelings, and reminding her that she was safe now. This conversation, though difficult, was an essential part of her emotional healing. He also learned from her stories about her family, community, and traditions. She spoke of her culture with pride, describing rituals, songs, and stories that had shaped her life. Listening to her, he realized the importance of preserving her identity and helping her reconnect with her heritage. He encouraged her to express herself through drawing, storytelling, and even small performances, allowing her to reclaim parts of herself that had been overshadowed by fear and isolation. As the weeks went by, her recovery became more apparent. She was able to walk short distances without assistance, eat independently, and engage in playful activities with a growing sense of confidence. Her laughter became more frequent, and her eyes, once filled with fear, now sparkled with curiosity and joy. Each milestone was celebrated quietly between them, a reminder of how far she had come and how resilient the human spirit could be. He reflected on the journey they had shared so far. From the moment he found her in the forest to the days spent supporting her recovery, every decision, every act of care had mattered. He realized that the true measure of courage was not in the moment of discovery alone, but in the continued commitment to care, support, and protect someone when they needed it most.
He had chosen to stay, and that choice had allowed her to reclaim her life.
By the end of Part 4, it was clear that the girl's life had been transformed. She was no longer the frightened, fragile child he had found in the forest. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more trusting. Their bond had deepened into a relationship of mutual respect, care, and understanding. And while challenges remained, the path forward was filled with hope, resilience, and the promise of a brighter future. By the time the girl was ready to leave the clinic, it was clear that the journey of recovery had transformed not just her life, but also the man who had found her. She walked with a steadiness and confidence that would have seemed impossible weeks ago. Her eyes, once wide with fear and uncertainty, now held a spark of curiosity and joy. She had begun to reclaim her childhood, slowly but surely, and every small step reflected months of careful care, patience, and encouragement. Even though her physical injuries had healed, he knew that emotional recovery would continue for some time. Trauma left traces that could resurface unexpectedly, and he was determined to be there for her through each step of that process. He spent the final days at the clinic preparing her for the transition to a safe living situation, whether with family, guardians, or a supportive community environment. The staff helped coordinate her education, therapy, and social reintegration, but he stayed close, making sure nothing was rushed or overwhelming.
On their last morning at the clinic, he walked with her in the garden one more time.
The air was crisp, the sun bright, and the birds were singing as if celebrating this milestone. She paused to pick up a small flower, examining its delicate petals with fascination. He smiled, watching her curiosity, and reminded her how resilient she had been. "You were so brave," he said softly. "You never gave up, even when things were really hard. And now, look at you. You're ready for the next part of your journey." She nodded, holding the flower carefully, and for the first time he saw her hope shining as clearly as her smile. As they walked back inside, they spoke quietly about the future. She talked about returning to school, reconnecting with friends, and learning new things. She even spoke about small dreams she had never shared before: painting, exploring nature, and, someday, helping other children who might face danger.
Her words were cautious at first, then more confident, and finally, a full expression of her personality shining through.
He realized that the strength he had seen in her in the forest was not just survival instinct, it was resilience, creativity, and courage waiting to grow.
After the formalities of leaving the clinic were complete, he accompanied her to her new living arrangement. She would be cared for in a safe environment, surrounded by people who could continue the support he had begun. It was bittersweet for him, joyful that she would be safe, but sad to think of parting ways after everything they had shared. As they arrived, he held her hand one last time, offering quiet encouragement. "You're ready for this," he said. "You have the strength and the courage to face whatever comes next." She looked up at him, her small face serious for a moment, then smiled, a full, radiant smile that conveyed gratitude, trust, and hope. Even after leaving her in capable hands, he knew his journey with her was not truly over. He continued to check in, offering support, advice, and encouragement as she navigated her new life. Each message, each visit, reinforced the bond they had built. He also used his experience to raise awareness about the challenges faced by children in remote or vulnerable communities. He spoke to local organizations, shared his story, and encouraged others to act when someone needed help. The impact of a single decision, to intervene, to stay, to care, became a powerful lesson for both himself and those around him. He often reflected on the moment he had first found her in the forest. How fragile and alone she had seemed, how uncertain her fate could have been, and how quickly life can change in a single moment. That memory stayed with him, a reminder that courage is not about seeking danger or glory, but about choosing to act when someone needs you most. He understood that the difference between life and death, despair and hope, could hinge on a single act of kindness, patience, and presence.
Over time, he witnessed her growth and transformation.
Letters from her caregivers described her laughter, curiosity, and engagement with learning.
She was excelling at school, making friends, and even helping younger children in her community.
He felt a profound sense of pride, not as her rescuer, but as someone who had been part of the process that allowed her strength to flourish. She had taken the opportunity to heal, to grow, and to reclaim her life, and he knew that his role, though significant, was only part of a much larger story of resilience. The girl also began to speak more openly about her past experiences. Sharing her story became a form of therapy, allowing her to process what had happened and to understand that she was not to blame for the hardships she had faced. He listened whenever she needed to speak, providing comfort and reassurance, and helping her interpret her experiences in ways that fostered healing rather than fear. Each conversation strengthened her sense of self, her confidence, and her belief in the goodness of people. Through this journey, he learned valuable lessons as well. He discovered the depth of human courage, the importance of empathy, and the power of choosing action over inaction. He realized that life sometimes presents moments that demand moral courage, patience, and unwavering presence. The choice to stay, to care, and to act can transform lives in ways that extend far beyond a single day or event. That realization became part of him, shaping his outlook on life and the way he approached helping others. As months passed, the girl's progress became more evident. She engaged in school, participated in community activities, and began to dream about the future in ways that were once unimaginable. Her laughter was frequent, her confidence strong, and her curiosity boundless. But the spark that had remained through her ordeal had grown into a bright flame, illuminating the path ahead. He continued to watch her journey with quiet pride, knowing that she would face the future with strength, resilience, and hope. The story of their encounter gradually spread beyond the local community. People spoke of a stranger who had found a vulnerable child, refused to walk away, and guided her towards safety and recovery. Bear. His actions inspired others to consider how they might respond when someone needed help. The tale was not one of heroism in the dramatic sense, but of quiet courage, steadfast presence, and moral responsibility. It reminded everyone that meaningful change often begins with small but decisive actions. In quiet moments, he reflected on what he had learned from the girl. Despite the fear, the danger, and the hardships, she had shown a remarkable capacity for resilience. She had taught him that strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but the willingness to keep moving forward despite it. Her journey reinforced his belief in the power of compassion, human connection, and the choices we make when faced with someone in need. Finally, he realized that this experience would remain with him forever. The girl's life, once on the brink, had been saved because someone refused to look away. He had witnessed courage, fear, trust, and hope intertwining in ways that few people experience in a lifetime. And he had learned that the true measure of impact is not in recognition or praise, but in the quiet knowledge that one life has been changed forever. In the end, the girl's journey toward recovery and empowerment became a symbol of what is possible when people act with compassion and courage. She would continue to grow, to learn, and to thrive, carrying with her the memory of a stranger who had believed in her when the world had seemed to have turned away. And he, forever shaped by that encounter, carried the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, a single choice to help, to stay, and to care can light a path toward hope, healing, and a brighter future. As he walked away that day, leaving her in a safe and loving environment, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and exhaustion, but he had also witnessed the incredible resilience of the human spirit. The bond they shared, forged through shared struggle and unwavering care, would remain with him forever. And the girl, once left for dead in the wilderness, was now on a path to a life full of possibilities, strength, and hope. Proof that sometimes refusing to walk away is the bravest choice a person can make.